Hey everyone, welcome back to the Little Mermaid retrospectives. If you're just joining us here on the channel, I've been watching a vast collection of Disney-related media, the purpose being to gather ideas for creating a role-playing game and fantasy universe that captures the general feeling of living in a Disney story. For my vast collection of feature films, check the Tapas and Stuff Productions podcast. I see now it was a dumb idea to make that whole thing a segment on a podcast instead of an actual video series in its own right, but I'm going to finish what I started. When I'm done with the Disney collection, I'll remake it as its own video series, but for now, for the next 2 years or so, I'm just gonna keep going with the segment. And for now, I am keeping things a little bit separate with, this playlist, in which I discuss Disney TV series I feel are worth gathering inspiration from. Today, we're starting Season 2 of the Little Mermaid TV series, which aired late in 1993. While Season 1 had 14 episodes, Season 2 has 9, and Season 3 has 8. Trust me, when it comes to how television seasons work on the Disney Channel, this is like the least weird one ever. Episode totals were random, yes, but they were 3 small-sized seasons aired from September to December over the course of 3 consecutive years. That's downright normal. In some other Disney cartoons, you'll find one season with less than 10 episodes, followed by another with more than 50, or staggering out a season so it airs over the course of almost 3 years. Disney just has this weird thing about television. They just don't seem to care about the medium very much, and they don't do any part of it halfway normal. Anyway, my point is, since this season has 9 episodes, the next 3 installments of the retrospective will consist of 3 episodes each. I still don't know why I talk so much more after the hiatus than I did before it, but I'm going to try to keep it simple enough that these 3-episode videos are not twice as long as the 4-episode videos about the first season. Just bear with me. Before we begin, this is the first video on the entire channel recorded on my new microphone. Seems my old one died last week after 3 years of loyal service. That's why last week's retrospective was so quiet. The microphone's gain just wouldn't go up any higher than that. I couldn't afford a proper replacement for the very big, very expensive, industrial-grade Blue Yeti microphone I'd been using, but this much cheaper little guy should do the job and do it well. It's a Fiducie? F-D-U-C-E? I'm going to call it a Fiducie. Okay. And it's much smaller, so I have to hold it in my hand. I can't just put it on a pile of books. Can't get close enough to it that way, so apologies if my voice fluctuates in volume a bit. I still get a hang of using this new device. And hey, let's take a moment to appreciate, shall we, that last week's episode really did come out last week instead of 2 to 8 months ago. I'm having, a good week. I can't make any promises that life won't become hectic again and force me to delay these things again. Let's talk Season 2 of The Little Mermaid. The season premiere is called Resigned to It. So evidently someone is going to resign, and they're making a really bad pun about resignedness. So far the season is off to a really bad start, putting a very wrong foot forward with that title there. We open on some kind of sporting event. The ball is a sponge. The sponge is alive and sapient and enjoying itself. Ariel and Flounder are playing with and against a bunch of random extras, mostly fishes, one octopus. Dudley brings some calculations to King Triton about a deadly poison called the Red Tide being on its way. Jesus Christ, the summary said this episode was about Sebastian resigning. You may have wanted to lead with the poisonous red stuff that kills everything. Triton goes to investigate in secret to avoid causing a panic, and elects specifically not to tell Sebastian, who has, the vice of gossiping about things that we've never heard about before. It's a Herculean effort to get Sebastian off his back so he can leave the castle without Sebastian pursuing, and it leaves Sebastian thinking the king no longer trusts him, so he turns in his resignation. Against Ariel's pleading, and after making her promise not to discuss this matter with the king, Sebastian goes to find a new job. Ariel and Flounder figure if he really means it, they'll help him. We first find him as a hot dog vendor at a carnival, and it turns out he's not a great chef. Ariel and Flounder gag on them, but to try to make Sebastian feel appreciated, they tell him they're good, and then other customers are less charitable. Meanwhile, Triton and Dudley investigate the Red Tide. It's a comin', all right. What are they supposed to do about it? Yikes, it's not just poison, it also has tendrils that crush rocks and reach out to grab people. Triton calculates that the current will take it away from Atlantica, and that therefore no one in Atlantica ever need know it was here. Somebody else's problem now, I guess. Cool concept, though. One for the books. The Keys and Kingdoms books. I mean, you know what I mean. So Triton returns to find Sebastian's resignation, and he's rather pissed off, thinking loyalty means nothing to Sebastian now. He has no regrets, until later when he finds he misses Sebastian's song and dance numbers. Sebastian starts a cave-to-cave sales job, just like Mori from a few episodes earlier, but the first cave he knocks at is home to a giant squid who chases him back to civilization. Ariel sings a little something to encourage him. Nice, I feel like we haven't had a song for a while. Just a little ditty about never giving up, and it's a duet between Sebastian and Ariel. Has that ever happened before? Yeah, that's pretty great. Next, Sebastian finds himself cleaning the teeth of a massive whale who bears suspicious resemblance to Monstro from Pinocchio, except he's black and has sharp teeth, so he looks a bit more like a real predatory whale. But clearly they were going for the Monstro reference. He's sleeping on the ocean floor in Monstro's exact position, and Sebastian fiddling around inside his mouth makes him sneeze. I love it. Just a giant open reference to a previous Disney film. You don't see that often. I think it was clever. Sebastian now thinks the only job he's suited for is advisor to the king. Flounder and Ariel encourage him that he can do anything he sets his mind to, including facing the king and begging for his old job back. Fortunately, the red tide is back, and it's right at Atlantica's gates. Who didn't see that coming? Triton goes out to face it, zapping it with his lightning. Seems to dissipate it temporarily, but there's just too much for him to take all at once. And the evacuating crowds cause a rock slide that buries the king. Sebastian swoops in to save him, and he's very much underqualified for such a thing, and soon all he can do is beg the red tide to stop. And it does. The red tide is made of millions of tiny red microbes, and their leader, sounds like Dave Coulier, speaks to Sebastian. The microbe admits that they never realized they were poisonous to other living things. No one ever bothered trying to speak with them before, but now that there's communication, they know to keep their distance from everybody. So they depart. Well, that was a stupid resolution. I liked the red tide better when it was a mysterious, poisonous thing. Triton invites Sebastian back, and Sebastian of course agrees, while overplaying his accomplishments during his time away. Credits, Flounder is still voiced by Eden Gross. Okay, I suspected as much because Flounder sounds a lot more pubescent than he did last time. They definitely can't hold on to the guy much longer, but for now he's still here. Guest stars consisted of Dave Coulier, naturally, as he was Dudley, and the microbe thingy, I thought that was him, and very old-school voice actors Alan Oppenheimer and Neil Ross are with us as well. The next episode is called Calliope Dreams. Ariel and Flounder are frolicking, I guess. So many episodes start with them just frolicking. I mean, I guess they don't have jobs. What else are they going to do? A human ship passes overhead, and a large concert harp falls overboard. Ariel investigates it, appreciating its craftsmanship, and dubs it the Stringamajigger. Clearly recognizing it as a musical instrument, she fetches Sebastian, asking him to identify it and maybe teach her how to play. He has no interest in doing so with a human artifact, so she vows to teach herself. Soon after, Triton unveils a piece of Ariel's inheritance. No reason is given as to why today is the day to give it to her, but it's a calliope. A calliope is a keyboard instrument not unlike a pipe organ, where steam blows through the whistles. The variety Triton unveils is truly massive, with gigantic coral pipes, and is, unsurprisingly, identified throughout as a sea calliope. We get it. You live under the sea, your song called Under the Sea won an Oscar, quit rubbing it in our faces and just call it a calliope. If you're going to give sea creatures some linguistic differences, have them call this one a calliope and a regular calliope a land calliope or some shit. Oh god, they're going to say sea calliope a lot, aren't they? And so Sebastian starts teaching Ariel to play the calliope, and she's a disaster at first because, doesn't know how to play it. I guess this is how all music lessons begin, really. Is she trying to play Aloha Oi? Maybe I was imagining that. The cacophonous calliope playing, well, it's worse than most amateur music lessons because calliopes, you see, are real fucking loud. Ariel's sour notes basically clear out this entire sector of the ocean, as well as awakening a prehistoric monster helpfully identified for us by those goddamn oysters on a string. I hate those guys, but they sure can exposit. As the ancient Cyclops. Okay, that's almost clever. It's a Cyclops, it's in the sea, it's a Cyclops. Its design is pretty good, I think. I'll have to wait for it to completely bust out of the crevice where it's sleeping to know for sure. Can't say yet, because the moment Ariel stops playing, after it's partially clawed its way out, it falls back to sleep. Sebastian feels Ariel might not have the knack for Calliope playing, but Triton is sure she shows potential. We have a flashback to Triton's youth with his grandfather. Triton's grandfather was King Neptune, and he was a masterful Calliope player. It's a rather beautiful flashback. Neptune playing a much smaller and quieter Calliope, and doing so very, very well to soothe young Triton to sleep. An even younger Triton than the one we saw in the episode Red. When they wish each other goodnight, little Triton is voiced by some kid, I guess we'll find out from the credits, and Neptune is voiced by Ken Mars with a slightly deeper, richer voice than he uses for Triton. Triton explains that no one else in his family has ever played the Calliope, and he was saving it for Ariel, presumably on account of Ariel's well-known musical talent. I don't know, man. Ariel is a singer, and while singing does have a lot of technical craft to it, you can study it, some people are just good at it, It's really not quite like playing an instrument. Understanding what it means to him, Ariel continues at her Calliope practice, but just can't quite seem to make it any good. Dudley is in this episode. He's in a lot of episodes, it seems, but he never does shit. I guess he gives Triton someone to talk to. That's his story purpose. Since Sebastian is usually with Ariel, Dudley gives the show someone for Triton to have private conversations with. And it is a rather funny character dynamic. You see, Triton never lets Dudley say more than 2 words, so he's basically just talking to himself. But he's not actually talking to himself, so it works. It's a good... He does serve a character purpose, yes. In this particular conversation, Triton reveals that the Calliope he gave to Ariel is not the one his grandfather played, as that one was one day found destroyed. Who or what destroyed it, they never found out, and that's when we cut back to the Cyclops, I guess, implicitly answering that question. Ariel's continual practice has awakened it once again, and at last it breaks out of its cavern. Okay, let's take a look at this bad boy. Okay, so it's humanoid, with bulging pecs and abs. It's got a single big yellow eye ringed in red, so when its eye is closed, it looks like it has a nose ring, even though it doesn't have a nose. It has tusks, it has ear fin thingies, not unlike that one owl guy from the old She-Ra cartoon. I think I see a dorsal fin, and, most unexpectedly, it has tentacles for a lower body, just like Ursula. 6 long, webbed tentacles with clubbed tips. Badass. I don't think Keys and Kingdoms really needs a Cyclops. The Cyclopes of Greek mythology were mostly children of Poseidon, and they work with him in his underwater palace. At least they do in Percy Jackson, so all Cyclopes are, Cyclopes. Yes, the plural of Cyclops is Cyclopes. Fun fact, it's speculated, and you'd be hard-pressed to disagree, that stories of Cyclopes began when people saw the skulls of elephants, because elephants have this big, giant nasal cavity that certainly looks an awful lot like a single giant eye socket, when stripped of all flesh. Anyway, the Cyclops has an incredible design, so I'm thinking if we make it slightly less humanoid, but keep the rippling muscles, and give it a name that isn't just sea something, we've got another great sea monster for Keys and Kingdoms on our hands. So we see that the Cyclops stops rampaging and instantly falls asleep again every time Ariel stops playing the Calliope, so kind of like a reverse Fang from Harry Potter, I suppose. Ariel, meanwhile, still wants to teach herself the stringamajigger, so she forces Sebastian to play the Calliope for a while to fake that she's still practicing. While Sebastian's jumping around is doubtless much more pleasant to listen to than Ariel's attempts to play, it does awaken the Cyclops again. Oh, here's another sweet detail about him. Most of his locomotion consists of burrowing through sand instead of swimming. That kicks ass. Meanwhile, the ship overhead seemingly hasn't gone very far. The harp, it transpires, belonged to Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Wrong, motherfuckers. Mozart died in the early 1790s, a full 100 years before The Little Mermaid is set. Try again. Anyway, Mozart is there, and the crew are like, "We're sorry about your harp, but we'll take care of your piano." I give it 5 seconds before they lose the piano. Yep, the piano goes overboard exactly 5 seconds after they make that promise. And no wonder, this damn ship doesn't have guardrails, jeez. After losing the piano, they then lose Mozart's bathtub. This is so these objects can hit the Cyclops on the head. By the way, why a bathtub? Couldn't they have come up with a third musical instrument that was also heavy? Maybe a pipe organ or something. Even a gong or a bass drum would have worked better than a damn bathtub. Maybe they were going for some surreal humor that with Mozart transporting by sea a harp, a piano, and a bathtub. I guess it kind of works. That surreal humor. I don't know. So, it's not the Cyclops who catches Sebastian playing the calliope, but Triton who gets there first. Ariel is fiddling with the harp, just kind of strumming the strings, and she's already attracted a bit of a crowd. Sebastian has the decency, while he's leading Triton to Ariel's location, to call out for Ariel that they're approaching, so she has time to not be caught playing the human instrument. The Cyclops, meanwhile, has found his way to the unsupervised calliope, but before he can smash it, like he presumably did to Triton's grandfathers, a goddamn meteor narrowly misses Mozart's ship and hits him instead. Jesus, this poor guy. I know he's a rampaging monster, but all this heavy stuff that keeps falling on him, man, worst luck in the world. Ariel shows herself to Triton, minus the harp, and he tells her that he's scheduled a recital for her tonight, despite her awful practicing presumably being quite audible to him. Triton, you're a moron. I think you're blinded by misguided attraction to the daughter who most closely resembles your late wife, bro. In fact, I think that's the source of most of your problems. Speaking of Queen Athena, Ariel looks an awful lot like her in the crown and necklace she wears for the recital. Easy enough to do. Athena's character design, only seen in the 2008 film Ariel's Beginning, the last of the infamous Disney-tuned cheapquels, is basically just Ariel, but with slightly more adult proportions, and green eyes instead of blue, and the addition of a crown, earrings, and necklace. So if you put a crown and necklace on Ariel, you're basically looking at a young Athena, but, you know, it's not like the makers of this cartoon knew that. Athena wouldn't be created until 15 years after this episode aired. The Seahorse Herald announces Ariel. Hey, I don't think we've seen him for a while. It's like first 2 episodes, I think. And Ariel is ready to be humiliated by publicly displaying her lack of calliope playing skills. I don't know. I think the whole kingdom already knows, girl. It's quite audible, but I suppose when they're actually in the stands waiting for you to start playing, that's even worse. Ariel plays, and she sucks, and when does the damn Cyclops show up? I came here for blood. Ah, there he is. Finally, the carnage I've been waiting for, and let me guess, Triton is going to exclaim, "It's the ancient Cyclops!" Yep, he did. Called it. He just can't help himself. He always has to exposit before he takes action. Also exposited, the Cyclops was supposed to sleep for 1,000 years, while apparently it's only been 400, which, I don't know, I don't care for really big time frames like that in fantasy, you know, kind of restricts the stories you can tell, but it's a lot better than earlier in the episode when the oysters said that the Cyclops had been sleeping for 7 million tides. I don't know how long a tide is, but a million of any time span is, it's a bit much. So the Cyclops disarms Triton, and while he's got to dive down to retrieve his weapon, the Cyclops finally does what he came here to do. He smashes the calliope to bits. Then he goes after Ariel. She thinks he somehow knows that she's the one who's been playing, but he's actually after the calliope-shaped necklace she's wearing. Ariel wonders if maybe the Cyclops could be put back to sleep by playing some music he likes. Nothing Sebastian tries works, so Ariel swims out to where she left the stringamajigger. She runs her hands across its strings, and sure enough, this makes the Cyclops drift off, just as Triton returns with the trident. Triton uses his magic to tuck the Cyclops away in a distant mountain crevasse, complete with a nice pair of earmuffs to prevent another wake-up. Triton never does find out about the harp, which I suppose is for the best. It does leave the story feeling a tiny bit unresolved, though. Triton laments the loss of another calliope, and Ariel assures him she doesn't want another one. Triton appreciates that she went to the trouble to feign interest, but even more so appreciates the honest truth. We get the moral that if someone wants you to pursue something you don't like, you have the right to say no. Politely, you know. Triton is sad that no one wants to play the calliope, but Ariel corrects him. Somebody does. In the final scene of the episode, they've gotten a new calliope, a smaller, quieter one like Neptune had, and Sebastian is teaching Triton to play it. And he's doing very well, just like his grandfather did. My goodness, it's the first time an episode of this show has nearly gotten me to shed a tear. Nearly. It's not that good, but I had some tingly eyes for sure. That was a wonderful end to the episode. Our end credits. In addition to the 4 leads, we have Jim Cummings as the seahorse appears, and I think maybe Jim does the snarling for the Cyclops as well. There's Nick Jameson, a voice actor whose name I know, but I'm not very familiar with his work. I don't think I've ever heard him in anything approaching like a major character role. He must have played the crewman who was talking to Mozart. And finally, Bradley Pierce, the kid who played Chip in Beauty and the Beast, he must have played young Triton. I was pleasantly surprised recently when I discovered that after Eden Gross ages out of the role, it's Bradley Pierce who takes over the role of Flounder here in the show. The Disney Wiki says that Eden played the role in Season 1 and Bradley in Seasons 2 and 3, but apparently they're mistaken, which happens sometimes. We're here in Season 2, and Eden is still going strong. It's possible that Eden was replaced before the season was even over, but, it's not likely, but I guess we'll find out. Season 2, Episode 3, Save the Whale. An episode all about Spot, to whom Disney Plus viewers were never properly introduced because, well, you know. It just ticks me off. We open on Ariel, Sebastian, and Flounder sunning themselves on rocks on the water's surface when who should show up but Spot. I guess the fake out that he's a shark actually does work here on Disney Plus, whose viewers have never seen Spot before. And I guess in this version of the show, Ariel is just already acquainted with Spot, the same way Urchin just happened to already be acquainted with Maury. Or not? Jeez, they're making a lot of continuity references here. Triton refers to Spot's first visit as having occurred last year, so, That's a bit of a question mark. We know the show takes place well before the events of the movie, and if Season 1 takes place a year before Season 2, well, Ariel was a very chesty 14-year-old back in Season 1, that's all I've got to say about that. So they frolic with Spot. Still frolicking. Yes, the years before recorded entertainment must have sucked, man. Nothing to do but run around and kick the can and all that. You couldn't read books because, well, before television was invented, everyone thought reading turned you withdrawn and antisocial, and as far as actual entertainment, you had to settle for whoever was performing in your area, and they had to do it every time, you know? So, frolicking. Ariel realizes Spot has a liking of doing tricks. He breaches the water and is spotted by some sort of circus owner who's out at sea for reasons. Yeah, they didn't really have performing orcas in the 1890s. The materials required to contain them are a very recent invention, but I guess that would make him an extremely extraordinary attraction at a circus of the time. Back in the sea, Ariel suggests to Triton and Sebastian that maybe they can have Spot put on a little show to display to the citizens that they don't have to be afraid of killer whales. We see Pearl in a crowd shot of the audience. Looking at Pearl's image gallery on the Disney Wiki, I got the rather disappointing vibe that Electric City might be the only episode in which Pearl actually participates, and that Save the Whale here is her final appearance. That's a shame. Also in the crowd, a whole bunch of merfolk who look like they were character designed by people who make low-budget rip-offs of Disney fairy tales, not by actual Disney character designers working with the real Little Mermaid. Yeah, apart from Pearl, everyone in this crowd shot here looks like they came from a Good Times Entertainment cartoon, or in the case of a particularly touchy-feely couple in the audience who also appeared at the Calliope recital, out of Jem or He-Man or some other cheap 80s cartoon. So they put on their little circus act, and everyone is awed, and they cheer, and it's freaking adorable. Can he get kidnapped now? Thank you. This circus guy, he said his name, but it wasn't intelligible. Let me rewind a bit, look at the subtitles. Pettigrew, okay. His circus is called Pettigrew's Penguin Park, so I assume he's Pettigrew. Anyway, Spot is curious about the ship, so he goes closer. Sebastian tries to stop him, and instantaneously Spot and Sebastian are caged, and the ship sails away. Yeah, I don't know how Pettigrew pulled that off. After commercial break, Ariel and Flounder pursue the ship. I don't think any swimming thing can keep pace with a ship. Should have them grab onto the cage or something. And Pettigrew and his son Tom talk about training Spot to perform alongside the penguins the park is named for. Tom is clearly reluctant about caging animals and making them perform. Spot and Sebastian have some sad bonding moments with the penguins, and Ariel and Flounder find their way to the park sometime after nightfall. Ooh, watching Ariel and Flounder make their way into the park makes me realize I do love me a good escape from the zoo story, especially when it's aquatic. The stuffy crowd goes wild for Pettigrew's dancing penguins, who respond much better to Tom's quiet encouragement than to the crack of Pettigrew's whip. There's a lesson to be learned there, though the more literal takeaway in my opinion is don't make animals perform. Ever. I believe in zoos. I believe in high-quality zoos that go deep into research and conservation and keep the animals' minds engaged. And it's fine, you know. Engaging an animal's mind is a lot easier than engaging a human. Yeah, a human will go insane if you lock him up in a zoo, but most animals aren't nearly so complex. Anyone that has a pet knows that all you need to do to keep them happy is just make sure they get exercise and toys. I always make sure to make my pets' feeding time interesting. I put the yummy food underneath the dry food so they have to forage for it a bit. And there you go, stimulated brain. I don't think cetaceans should be kept in zoos because A, whales and dolphins are very athletic creatures. The amount of space they require to get enough exercise simply cannot be given to them in an aquarium. And B, cetaceans in zoo environments are usually expected to perform, and I think that's cruel. Anyway, it seems Pettigrew has discovered Sebastian and is making him tap dance. So he has 2 new attractions, Spot being the grand finale. He jumps through flaming hoops, classic. Sebastian realizes that Ariel and Flounder have come for him, and he asks how he expects to get them all out the door, and Ariel's like, "What's a door?" Huh, that's true, isn't it? They don't have doors in Atlantica. All the windows and entrances are totally open to the outside world. I guess when all you wear is a bra, that eliminates some of the desire for privacy, but still. I think, you need a little bit of alone time. Anyway, Ariel sees Tom turning the crank that activates the gate to Spot's enclosure and quickly figures out how it works. She figures she can open that gate, while the main door to the park, they'll just get out the way they got in, waiting for the big door to open so that the human guests can go in and out. Apparently, to get to this aquatic park, you have to take a boat through the big door. Not sure about the logistics there. I think they had the wrong idea by trying to tell an aquatic park story in their series set in the 1890s. Anyway, the escape plan engages. Spot stops to save the penguins, and that gives Pettigrew time to shut the big doors. But then Spot jumps over the wall, carrying Ariel, Flounder, Sebastian, and the penguins with him. That's pretty hardcore. Pettigrew, Tom, and the onlookers are pretty shocked at this daring escape, though none of them comment on the goddamn mermaid accompanying this escape plan in plain view, though it is nighttime, I suppose. You have to assume in a nighttime scene that people in the scene can't see as clearly as we, the audience, can, Spot goes home, they all go home to Atlantica, and Spot returns once more to his pod, accompanied by the penguins. The heroes hope they'll see Spot again next year. Apparently it's migration routes that bring him in contact with Atlantica on an annual basis. That makes sense. And that's pretty much the end of the episode. Lots of waving goodbye. Our end credits give us only 2 guest voices, Jeff Bennett and Clive Revill. I had a feeling that Tom was played by Jeff Bennett. I guess I was right, and I've never heard of Clive Revill. Apparently he's a New Zealander with a pretty prestigious voice acting resume from the looks of it, so I'm guessing he was Pettigrew. And for some reason, Ken Mars isn't credited in this episode, even though Triton was very much there. That's odd. This was a pretty fun trio of episodes. Sorry. Some stammer in there. Calliope Dreams, definitely the best of the 3. It had an awesome monster and great family stuff between Triton and Ariel. The other 2 were okay. I think I'm going to rank Resigned 2 at the lowest because the climax with the true nature of the Red Tide was a total fucking letdown. I don't normally rank episodes. I don't know why I did that. Point is, good start to a season. Plenty of fun action set pieces and concepts for me to steal. Don't forget to look below for the link to my Patreon. I have nothing to offer you in return as of this recording, but if you'd be so kind. And maybe you're listening to this in the future, where I make real content and there is actual stuff on my Patreon. All I know is, unlike the one patron I have, for whom I'm also the only patron she has, I just don't have the incentive to make exclusive content just for her. She works with me on stuff. She's seen it. If I had other patrons, maybe then I'd be incentivized to make secret stuff for them.